Welcome back to the channel. Thank y'all for hanging with me on this Thursday. So losing fish on a chatterbait can be an issue if you let it. I've never had too bad of an issue with my setup, but I want to note that your setup and your hook go together. So I'm going to give you my setup, the size hook that goes with that setup, and why you lose most of the fish that you do on a chatterbait. It's typically not necessarily your setup, but more so the fact when you're trying to implement the action, like the big sweep for a yo-yo to get your bait to kick and move, you're out of position. So if you cast your bait out that way and you do a big sweep, you're kind of on a semi-slack line there for a little bit. And when they bite it, you can't catch up with them in time. So I'm going to go into that because I feel like we've gotten better gear as far as the baits than we had 7 or 8, 9, 10 years ago. And you can minimize that as well. So let's talk about the rod and reel first, because I think that's probably the most important thing to fix in this whole situation. So you'll hear a lot about parabolic bending rods. You've got to realize that up until about 10 years ago, you couldn't really find a graphite rod that bended parabolically. So composite glass was what guys threw big, deep diving crankbaits on. Some guys even used composite glass in some of their punching rods because we just didn't know how to make graphite bend like that at that time. Most of the really expensive good graphite you found back then was extra fast, and that's not what you want for this technique. You want all the load to be in the middle of the rod. Now, the cool thing about that is most middle of the road price range rods you find bend like that. So those $80 to $120 rods bend parabolically. So you can take any 7-foot medium heavy rod that is going to be kind of low end in the price, makes a great chatterbait rod, a great lipless crankbait rod, a great rod that we used to always have to use composite glass. I'm getting old, and I used to throw this in like 2007, 2008, like the first year it came out, and everyone was telling you had to throw it on composite glass. So I've been a composite glass guy. The downside of glass mixed with graphite is that it's heavier. It's going to wear you out, a lot more strain on your muscles, joints, all of that. So graphite would be the way to go, in my opinion. But with saying that, I only use fiberglass because that's just how I like the feel of it, and it's hard to teach old dogs new tricks. Okay, so with that setup though, the parabolic bending rod, I like a 6/4 to 1 gear ratio reel. I don't want to be winding it too fast that I pull the bait away from the fish, but I also want 17-pound test because I want to pull into them hard, and if they make an initial run, don't worry about it. Again, I've talked a lot about how this bait, when you're yanking it out of the grass and you're snapping and popping it, you can go with a heavier line. I'm not using my line to get that bait down. I want to use the heaviest possible line, and with this technique, I don't think I'll ever break 17. I don't even have to really loosen up my drag at all. Keep it as tight as I want with 17. I never lose fish because this is such a limber rod that gives you a little bit more leeway when you do hook into a really big one. And then the main key there is the 4/0 hook. I think when you get up into that 5/0 hook with a parabolic bending rod, you're going to dump a lot of fish close to the boat. So you'll get them hooked, you'll get them most of the way in, and then they come off. That's been my issue with losing fish on a chatterbait. So 4/0 hook, and a lot of chatterbaits are made with a 4/0, and most of the really good ones are made with a 4/0. Now, where we have advanced this technique just in the last 8 years is with the jackhammer. Now, I talk about being out of position. So again, you make your cast out there. In the old school chatterbaits, man, you had to really rip them and yank them and pull them and burn the reel to get that bait to kick. So it's shaking and moving. It's coming back to the boat. And every time you do something with your rod, it makes it kick. The new chatterbaits with this stronger, heavier, dutier blade, it doesn't take all that yanking and pulling. It just takes one little pop your rod. That's all you got to do, and that bait kicks. So for that, you can stay in position. You don't have to be, you cast it over there. You don't ever have to get your rod way back over here to get that bait to yo-yo and dance. You can just keep it out right there and just pop it. Reel, pop, reel, pop. And it's going to do the same thing. The old school mentality was you really had to implement the action. You want it to dance and kick and search. That's where you're really going to entice the bite. So you do that with one of those old school chatterbaits, and that's when they hit it. And when your rod tip is behind you and it's a semi-slack line. So the new chatterbaits, the blade on those, make the bait respond a lot quicker to the action you're implementing. Therefore, you will not be out of position when one bites and they hit it. You feel that rod load up a little bit, wind it as fast as you can like any other jig. This isn't just bladed jigs. This is swim jigs. This is a hair jig for suspended fish rather in 20 feet of water, a football jig on the bottom in 20 feet of water, or a finesse jig on a log in 5 feet of water. When you feel that bite, it's not like a Texas rig where you kind of slowly wind as fast as you can and pull. And every jig you're going to pull a little bit differently. The chatterbait, you just wind and pull. Unless they like really slackline you, then you can give it somewhat of a hook set, but you don't want there to be really any slack line in there if you can help it. Sometimes the fish do that. You try to reel it as fast as you can, but that's any jig. Reel as fast as you can, and then on the chatterbait, pull into them. That should help you land more fish. We've gotten this technique better and better each year. That's why you kind of got to stay up to pace and up to par with these new baits. But some of the old stuff, like the old composite glass rods, you can find those. They're affordable too. They're not too bad. But again, parabolic, 4-rod hook, and keep your rod tip out in front of you to where when one bites it, you just pull. You don't have to worry about trying to catch up with them or any of that. Try that. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.